In this video, you will learn how to create a macOS menu bar app and how to interact with the user's pasteboard. Hey, this is Flo. And after yesterday's successful first stream, at least yesterday as of the date of this recording, I figured I might as well do another code along style video. And this time I'm working on a menu bar app for macOS that I've already written actually a few days ago, and I've posted about it on Twitter. So if you don't follow me on Twitter yet, go ahead and do that. And people on Twitter seem to like the idea, so I figured I would just do another code along video recreating the app and explaining my thought process, explaining how I work and how this app can be made. So you've already seen how it works. There will be a SF image in your menu bar, and when you click on it, you will notice that the active app does not change to whatever our app is called. It stays as Xcode in our case. Then there will be a list of links which we can save through these two text fields, and then if we hit one of these buttons, the link will be copied to the clipboard. Of course, we can also quit the app with the quit button. I'll demonstrate that later in the app that we will actually build. Okay, so to get started, I already created an Xcode project and I selected use core data. Because of that, there is always a bunch of stuff that we need to clean up first. So let me get rid of most of those things. So in our view body, let's say welcome to menu bar links. That's what I called the project. And then let's give that a ton of padding. Let's remove the add item function. Let's remove the delete items function. Let's remove this item formatter, and let's also just remove that preview because we will not be using SwiftUI previews in this project. I don't like using them on the Mac because the live preview feature actually doesn't really work on a Mac, as in it's not running inside of Xcode as it is for an iOS app. But when you click the little play button in your SwiftUI preview, it will actually open a new window of your app and display that component there. I don't like how that's handled, so I might as well just run the app. You know what I mean? So I just get rid of the SwiftUI preview on the Mac. Let's also clean up the persistence controller. I will not be using the preview controller, so that can go. I will also remove all of this in-memory stuff and also remove this large arrow comment, and then we will only have our NS persistent container. We will load the persistent stores, and we'll make sure that automatically merges changes from parent is set to true. I don't think that this is really important as we're not dealing with CloudKit. I think this line is only important for CloudKit, but we'll leave it in anyways. Then let's also clean up the model so we don't need this random item entity. So let's get rid of that. And I think we can just get started by creating our model. So let's add entity. I will call this one QL link for quick links link. And it will have an ID, a title, and a URL. The URL will be a string. The ID will be a UUID. And the title will also be a string. If you've watched my previous live stream where I've built a pros and cons Mac app, then you will know that I tend to manually generate my classes. So if I select the entity and then here in the inspector, for the code gen, I just select manual/none, hide this again, and then go to editor, create NS managed object subclass, hit next. Let's create a new folder for that actually. And let's save it into this data folder that I just created. Okay, for some reason the folder didn't work. So let's just create a group. Let's call it data. Interesting. So let's call it core data, and then move both of these in there. Now let's hit Command B to build the project and see if it works. Okay, build succeeded. These are just 2 Xcode errors. The first time that you build a core data project, this will pretty much always happen. So let's just press Command-Shift-K. Okay, and then in here, let's create some wrapper attributes so we don't always have to unwrap the properties. So let's create a var wrapped ID, which will be of type UUID. In this case, we will just force unwrap our ID. So we'll have to make sure that every time that we create a new QR link, we provide a valid UUID. Then let's also create a wrapped title, which will be a string. And that's just our title or an empty string if there is none. And then also a wrapped URL, which will be a URL. And in here, we will just construct a new URL via a string of our URL, or actually URL, and we'll force unwrap both of these, because in this app, we will make sure that every time that the user creates a new QR link, that they set a ID, or that we set an ID, and that they set a title and a URL. So force unwrapping here should not be an issue, because we make sure that every time that one of these instances get created, there will be a title and a URL. So in fact, we can just get rid of this nil coalescing operator here as well and just force unwrap the title. As I said, might not want to do this in production, but I think for an app where we really strictly control the input, it is fine to do it like this. Okay, so the core data part is actually already done. Next up, let's create a new group here and let's call it menu bar. And this will contain all of the code that we need to add a menu bar item. So first of all, we need to create an app delegate that is needed to register the menu bar item. So let's import SwiftUI and let's create a class called app delegate, which will inherit from NS object and conform to NS application delegate. This class will need a popover. That is basically what's shown when the user clicks on the menu bar item. So this thing here is called an NS popover. And this will be an NS popover. And now this is a bit ugly, but I will make this object static because we will need to access it in some other places. So yeah, I'll make it static, but maybe you shouldn't do that. I'm not too sure. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it and leave you with the information that it's probably not the best idea. Okay. And next, let's application did finish launching is the delegate function that we need here. And here we can set our self.popover. We need that capital S self because the popover is a static variable. To access the static variable, we need to access it via the class. We could also say appdelegate.popover. I like to say self.popover, so it's instantly recognizable that this is actually in the same class. It's just a static variable. And then here we can set the content view controller to be an NS hosting controller with a root view. And now we don't have that view yet, so let's create that. So let's create a new file, SwiftUI view, and I'll just call it popoverview. We can leave that as is for now. And then in our app delegate here, we can say the root view is a popover view. But as we're working with core data, we will have to pass the manage object context into the SwiftUI environment. So to do that, we will say .environment \managed object context. And the context will be our shared persistence controllers context. So we will say persistence controller .shared .container .view context. Okay. To make sure that the popover gets hidden again when the user clicks somewhere else on their device, we will have to set the behavior of the popover to be transient. Okay. Next up, let's create a status bar controller. That's what I called it. And we will use that to fill in this SF symbol here and to tell it what to do once the user clicks on it. So let's create a new file and let's call it status bar controller. Okay, so let's import AppKit. Let's create a class called status bar controller. This will have a private var status bar, which is an NS status bar. So status bar of type NS status bar. And then two more attributes, an NS status item and an NS popover, which will then present our SwiftUI view. So let's add a status item as well, and a status item, and then let's also add our popover. Just like that. Okay, let's create an initializer where we pass in a popover, which we then configure in the status bar controller. So this will be of type NS popover. First thing that we do is make sure that we save it into our property here. So self.popover equals that popover. We will also initialize the status bar. So status bar equals .init. And then status item is our status bar. And then we can create a new status item from that NS status bar with a length of NS status item dot variable length. You can also specify how large your status item will be, but I think it's just a bit easier to work with it if you just select NS status item dot variable length. I think that's the easiest solution. And then next, let's configure the button, give it an action, give it a target, and give it an NS image to show in the menu bar. So let's grab the button first of all. So let's say if let button equals our status item dot button. This is a optional property, so we have to do all this if let stuff. And then in here we can configure. So we can say button.image is an NS image with a system symbol name, and you can use any system symbol that you want. I will just use house right now. The one that I've showed you earlier is list.bullet.rectangle.fill, but you can use any SF symbol that you'd like. And as this is just an example project, let's set the accessibility description to nil. If you were to create an app like this and then push it to the App Store, you should probably care about accessibility and add a description right there. Next, let's add an action, and that is a selector. And we'll have to create a function for that. So let's create an add Objective-C func show our app. That's what we want to happen when the user clicks on the NS image. So it will have a sender of any object. That's just a signature that we need. Okay. And now we can use that here in our selector. And let's also make sure that the target is set to self. So this selector is called on our own instance. Next, let's implement this show app function. So there will be two cases. Either the popover is shown, then we want to hide our SwiftUI view, and else we want to show our SwiftUI view. So hiding is actually super easy. Let's just say popover.perform close with no sender. We don't care about that. Just close the popover. And else, if we want to show it, we can just say popover.show relative to the bounds of our status item button. So let's say status item dot button. We can false unwrap this because we have created a button here. dot bounds of our status item dot button. Once again, the preferred edge is the maximum Y edge, so the top basically. Okay, and that's already everything in our status bar controller. Let's go back into our app delegate. And in here we now need to create a status bar controller. So let's add a variable for that. Let's call it status bar, and that will be of type status bar controller optional. And then we can say status bar is a new status bar controller with our popover. Self.popover, of course. All right, so now all of the menu bar stuff is almost set up. The last thing that we need to do is register this app delegate in our app. So to do that, let's open our menu bar links app. Let's go in here and let's say add NS application delegate adapter with the type of app delegate.self is our new app delegate. This way it's registered in the app and the system will actually call all of these application did finish launching functions and so on. Okay, we can close the app delegate, we can close the app, and I think now we can give it a run and perhaps already see something in the menu bar. Okay, so now the app is running. We have our window with the welcome to menu bar links content view. And then we also have this little house icon here in the menu bar. And if we click that, then a popover will be shown. It's not well aligned and it looks very bad because there is no padding, but we will fix all of that. Okay, so let's close the app again. Let's also clean up the sidebar here a bit. So let's move the core data model and the persistence controller into the core data group. And let's collapse both of these. Let's move the popover view up a bit. And I think that's already the next thing that we can have a look at. So let's open the popover view next. And in here we now create basically everything that's in this app here. So for that, first of all, since we're dealing with core data, we need managed object context. And then we can also create a fetch request for our QL links. So let's create an add fetch request with empty sort descriptors. We don't really care about sorting them. If you care about sorting them, this is the place where you should do it. And then let's call this variable links, and this will be a fetched results of QL link. That's what we call our core data class, quick links link basically. And then inside of the view, let's create a VStack with an alignment of leading. We don't care about the spacing for now. In here, let's iterate over all of these links with the wrapped ID as our identifier. And let's grab a link in here for each link. Let me remind you, we basically have an H stack with a clickable text link and then a spacer and a button on the right hand side which copies the link to the pasteboard. So let's get started by creating an H stack. First element will be a link with a title of our wrap title and a destination of our wrapped URL. Then we said we want to have a spacer. And next there will be a button with a label that is an SF symbol. So system name. And this one has a bit of a longer name, the one that I used. So let's use the same one again. It's called arrow right doc on clipboard. I think that's the correct name. Next up, let's do the NS pasteboard management. So you'd think that it's super easy, and I will show you how the basic API to copy something into the pasteboard works. So you can just say ns pasteboard.general.setString, or set any other type that you want, we will use the set string. We will set the link.wrapped URL, and as the type we will of course use string because we're copying a string. And actually we're not using the wrapped URL, we're using the URL and then false unwrap it because we want a string and not a URL object. Don't mind this Xcode internal error. I don't know why, but ever since Xcode 13.3 came around, it constantly crashes for me. Now, as I said, you might expect this to be super easy, but only using this line of code and setting a string will actually do nothing to the NSPaceport. You have to clear its contents first. To do that, let's say NSPaceport.general.clear contents. And now the setString function actually does something. I have no idea why this API is in place. I think it would be a lot easier to use if you don't have to call clear contents first, but that's just the way it is. And then we also want to close the popover again. So let me demonstrate that. In the completed app, when I click the button, the popover closes. We will also want to have that behavior. And to achieve that, we can call our app delegate.popover. And this is why we made it a static property, so we can access it right here. And we can then just call perform close with no sender. Okay, so that's basically the top portion done. And let's do the bottom half. So as you can see, there's a divider and then 2 text fields and 2 buttons. So let's collapse this for each so we have a bit more space. Let's create a divider. For the divider, let's also give it some vertical padding of maybe 4 points. And below that, let's create a new VStack. So everything is in its own component. Basically, you could extract that to a different view. I'll just keep it in a VStack here. It's not really needed because we already have a VStack surrounding it. I just like to separate my components a bit in the case that I want to pull it out into its own SwiftUI view later on. So in this VStack, as we already discussed, there will be 2 text fields. The first one will be the title of our new link. And the second one will then be the URL. So let's create 2 new state properties. The first one will be link title. That's a string, and of course it will be empty by default. Let's just create a second one called link URL. And let's bind to these. So the first one is link title. The second one is link URL. And next we will add the quit button and the save button. For that, let's create an HStack. First button will just say quit, and this one will call terminate on the NS application. So NS application dot shared NS application dot shared dot terminate with no sender again, then a spacer in between, and a second button called save. Now I want this button to be highlighted so the user knows that this is the primary button. So we will just add a bordered prominent button style. This will then also give it the tint color that the user selected in their macOS settings. Okay, and in here, let's make sure that both of the text fields are filled out correctly. So let's make sure that there's a valid URL. So if URL with the string of our link URL is not nil, and the link title is not empty, and the link URL also is not empty. I'm not sure if an empty URL is actually valid, so I'll just double check it here, make sure that it is a valid URL and that the string is also not empty. If all of that is the case, then we can create a new QL link. That will be a QL link with our current view context. For that QL link, we will set the ID to be a brand new UUID. We will set the title to be our link title. And we will set the URL to be our link URL. Then let's save the changes. So try view context.save, and let's also clear out both of the text fields in case you want to add multiple links at once. And of course there is a typo here. Okay. So let's say link title is an empty string and link URL is also an empty string. Okay, just a few more things. So let's run this right now, see how it looks, and then see what we want to change. Okay, so still the main app window will open with our content view. We have our menu bar item, and that's what it looks like right now. So of course we don't have any links yet, but we have a text field, another text field, and our 2 buttons, but they're really crammed in there. So let's give it some padding and a frame as well. So on our VStack closing brackets, let's add some padding and let's give it a fixed width of 200. Okay, let's run that again. And now it already looks a lot better. Of course, there are still no links because we haven't entered any. So let's enter a link. And for that, I will actually use the completed app. So I will just copy my Twitter URL. Let's call this one Twitter, and as the URL, let me paste what I just copied. There you can see that it definitely works. When I hit save, then it will be entered here. Okay, so one more thing, you might want to remove the button style for this button. So let's do that first. Expand our for each again, and then for the second button, let's add a button style of plain. That should get rid of it. Okay. There's basically one last thing, and if I run the app again, I can show you why it's needed or why it might be nice. So our app really only lives in a menu bar. The main window serves no purpose at all. Everything happens in this little menu bar, Popover. So why don't we just get rid of this window altogether? To do that, let's go into the application project, select the target, go to info.plist and add a new value and scroll down until you can see application is agent, and then you can just set that to yes. Now if we hit save and run the app again, the window will open because we had it open last time, but if we close it now and run the app again, then it will not open again. So what this means is the first time that the user opens the app, for example, you could show a little onboarding window, and then the next times that the app will be opened, no window will be shown, and you will just have your menu bar item. Okay, that's it with the video. I hope you learned something. I hope you found it enjoyable. I think this app is rather useful. You could, of course, add more features to it and also save different kinds of data. This is just what I needed a few days ago, so I built it. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment down below with other app ideas that we should build in this more relaxed code-along format. Also, of course, tutorial ideas if you have any.